Hey, what's up, guys? It's ex-Morgan with My Spiritual Life, and I have the Ubermormon with me today. And yeah, man. And I am so excited. Whoops, here we go. We're about to get an echo. Sorry about that, guys. Guess what? It's working. All right.
Awesome.
Ubermormon just started a YouTube channel. Tell us a little bit about yourself for people who don't know you.
All right. Well, that's probably everybody. I am the Ubermormon. Yeah, that's me. I'm inspired a little bit by Nietzsche, hence the name Ubermormon. One day I'll do a video about that, but for now I'm just kind of trying to talk about maybe healing after Mormonism. I don't want to do like truth claim after truth claim video. I feel like those are getting boring. I just want to talk about things. So I'm in school. I'm studying to be a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm just making videos about things that I learn in class that I feel like are relevant to leaving a high demand religion. So whenever I learn something interesting in class, I make notes about it, and then I put a Mormon spin on it, and that's my channel so far.
Woo! Yes,
Yeah.
I've enjoyed your videos. People should check out. I liked your what was it called? Theism versus atheism.
It was something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I really liked that one. I might add that link below later. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about dealing with fear when leaving a high demand religion. And I feel like I found a video that really spoke to me about this, and it's by Jordan Peterson. And basically, we're going to be showing some clips from that and then just kind of having a discussion off of there. When you decide that, you maybe don't want to be a part of your religion anymore, oftentimes you end up staying in it longer than you want to. And that's usually because you're afraid. You're afraid of mostly what people are going to think of you and how they're going to react to you. And so I'll be touching more on that with, applying Jordan Peterson's advice to this. A little bit of background. Jordan Peterson, he's a psychologist. And in this video that I'm about to pull up, I'm skipping the beginning, but basically he's talking about this book called The Neuropsychology of Anxiety. The Neuropsychology of Anxiety by Jeffrey Gray. In this book, he details some studies that they did with rats. And a lot of times, people will do studies on rats to try to predict human behavior, right? And what humans are going to do. And so in this video, they're specifically talking about rats and motivating rats and anxiety and things like that. So that's a little bit of a preface. So let's see if I can get this clip going. Ah, there it is. Look at that.
Beautiful.
Okay, here we go. Let's see.
So Gray talked a lot about how to motivate a rat. And you might have heard about B.F. Skinner. He used food pellets to motivate his rats. But what you don't know about Skinner is that those rats were starved to 3/4 of their normal body weight. So they would work for food, man. So Skinner's rats were kind of oversimplified. But you can get rats to work for food. They don't have to be that hungry. You can get them to work for food, and they'll do all sorts of things. They'll press levers and they'll open doors, and they'll solve problems, and they'll do all sorts of things. And one of the things you can do to kind of measure how much the rat is motivated is, let's say you've run him through a maze and he knows there's some food at the end of the maze. You can tie a little spring to his tail and see how hard he pulls when you open the door to the maze. So that's how much rat work the rat is willing to do. So you can measure that. Or you can see how fast he skitters down the maze, and you can get an estimate about the rat's motivation. And so then you might say, well, how motivated is a hungry?
I've been getting paid $1,000.
Well, this is so exciting.
Cool. I'm so proud of her.
A month, if not more.
If not more. I think
she has no idea how much money she's been making. She's like, I've been making in between $2,000 and $2,000 a month, somewhere in that window.
If not more. Oh my God. All right, here we go.
Depends on how hungry he is. But there's another answer.
Jesus.
It also depends on what's chasing him when he's going after the food. So if you have a rat and you have food over here, and you waft in some cat odor. Rats hate cat odor, and it's innate. They never have to see or smell a cat to be absolutely petrified by cat odor. And so if you waft in some cat odor and then open the door, that rat will zoom to that food a lot faster than it will if it's just hungry. So a rat running away from something that it doesn't want towards something that it does want is a very motivated rat. And so one of the things we did with the future authoring program that's germane to this idea of terror, because there's this idea in the Old Testament, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And it's a pretty harsh idea. But there's something really useful about it, because one of the things you see with people all the time is that maybe they're trying to stumble forward towards their ideal, as poorly defined as it might be, but then they're afraid, right? They're afraid about what they might encounter, and that stops them, because fear does stop people. It freezes you like a prey animal, and so people move ahead, but then they get afraid, and then they stop moving ahead. And that's not so good, because negative emotion is a really powerful motivator. So we're more motivated by negative emotion than positive emotion, quantitatively speaking. Quantitatively speaking, you can measure that. And that's, I think, because we can only be so happy, but we can really be suffering and dead, you know? So we have to pay more attention to the negative. And that's bad, because the negative can stop you. And then in my clinical practice.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there for now, for a minute. Couple things that really stand out to me with that. Just first of all, I feel like fear has ruled my life for most of it. I had a lot of childhood trauma that left me just very anxious about most things, and like a very, very much a paralyzing anxiousness, because like you said, that fear, a lot of us, when we get afraid, we let that fear stop us, because that fear feels like it's in front of us, right? And he's going to talk about, putting the fear behind you, and it's really cool. But I think, for me, learning how to navigate that, to put that fear behind you, has been very, very helpful for me. Because if you keep letting fear be in the driver's seat, you're going to go places you didn't really want to go in your life. Another thing that I really love that he said is that we're more motivated by bad emotions than we are by good ones, because there's a limit to, how happy you can be, but there's limitless amounts of suffering. And I thought that this was such a powerful idea to keep in mind, because when you're dealing with something like a huge life change, like a faith crisis, it's very likely that there's a lot of negative emotions going on, and you're going to want to minimize those. But maybe that's not the right way to handle the situation, right? And by minimize those, I mean like probably lie to people, to try to, minimize, your negative feelings and things like that. So hit me with what you're thinking, Ubermormon.
Yeah, so I have two thoughts there. First of all, I feel like what he's saying here is the carrot and the stick together are more useful and more motivating than just the carrot or just the stick. So this is like, he doesn't talk about it in this video, but anybody who hasn't done like the future authoring program that he has on his website, or it's called selfauthoring.com or something like that. Yeah. It's a really, really helpful way to kind of spell out the way that it starts by saying, imagine a future that you would like to have, and imagine the steps that you would need to take to get there. And then imagine a future that you would have if you didn't take any of those steps, and really spell those out clearly and really kind of make them crystal clear so that you know exactly what it is you're aiming for and what it is you're avoiding. And I've done that, and it was crazy helpful. It caused me to leave my last job. It caused me to get back into school. It was like life changes started happening for me after I envisioned the future that I want to have and the future that I was going to have if I didn't take any of those steps. So that's the first thing that comes out for me. The second thing is, if you imagine fear in front of yourself, kind of like a brick wall, if all you're ever doing is avoiding that fear, you're kind of going to start, imagine that you're a river and you're going down and you get stopped by a dam. And so you have to go a different direction. And then you get stopped by another dam and you go a different direction. Like, you end up 10 years down the line in a place that was never really yours to end up at. Like, you end up living a different life than maybe you were meant to live. And it's because you let that fear stop you. So I love the idea of let's find a way to make this push you where you are supposed to be going. And I mean, only you really know where you're supposed to be going, right? So who am I to say like that's sending you down the wrong direction? But I think within all of ourselves, we really know like, this is stopping me from reaching what I was supposed to reach. And, when that happens to you 5 or 20 times throughout your life, you end up living a different life.
I love that. I think, and I think to define it even better, it's like, okay, there's that life that maybe you weren't meant to live, right? But maybe it's just like the life that you didn't want to live.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets like, when you realize, like, leaving a religion, for example, it's risky, right? It's risky for your relationships. It's risky, maybe for your mental well-being. But when you make that pain real, the pain of whatever it is that's stopping you, like what's going to happen if you don't make that change or take that path that you want to take, you make that pain so real, that pain of like, what if I don't do anything to make my life better? And when you can vividly picture that and picture that pain and make that pain so real, then and that pain, like with Mormonism, for example, would be like, imagine pretending to be Mormon for 20, 30, 40 years. Let that pain sink in, and that pain can propel you forward instead of holding you back. And like you said, the whole, it's the life you didn't mean to live thing. When we're so caught up in being afraid of what everyone else thinks, and we let that steer us, we're not even living like the life we weren't meant to live. We're living someone else's life because we're letting other people's fear steer us. It's not even our own fear. It's our fear of their fear. Like, because when, we're afraid our mom is going to judge us for wearing a tank top, right? We're not afraid of wearing a tank top. We're afraid of her being upset with us for wearing a tank top. So we're afraid of her fear. And so then you're letting someone else's fear steer your life. And then, like you said, that's just not, is that really worth it in the end? Like, I think life's too short to be anything other than you. I think the best thing we can do is try to confront those fears instead of letting them drive us around.
Yeah. So I was on the phone with a friend recently, and we were talking about, he's been debating this idea in his head of, when do I tell my family that I'm done? Like, and that's a hard question. And I'm not even going to touch on that question for him, or for anybody, but for him, he said he was kind of like at his house relaxing, and he kind of suddenly had like this thing wash over him where he's like, I've been doing other people's stuff for 25 years and I only have 100 years. So like, when am I going to live my life how I want to live it? Because I already gave a quarter of it away. And that's an incredibly deep thought.
Yes.
And like, you've been, the longer that you stay in a situation that you don't think, that doesn't feel right, or you want to leave, you're embodying a lie. And I think that every time you tell a lie or embody a lie, you get a little bit weaker. You get a little, like, you kind of diffuse into the ether a little bit. You just kind of disappear and become like a nothing. And if you do that too many, like, you have 100 lie points, and you can tell like maybe 4 of them, but like, but if you start telling like 4, like, you're 40% gone, you know what I mean? Like, you start to dissipate into nothing, and your personality, you just become like a weak little soy boy yes man. So like, I don't know, rant over, I guess, but like that's what speaks to me there.
It speaks to me a lot too. And I think the reason it speaks to me so much is because I do feel like, as a child, I was in such a like a difficult emotional circumstance with my parents, that it made me feel like I didn't know who I was, and in order to be safe, I just had to kind of do whatever would make them happy, right? And a lot of us get into that pattern of just learning to do whatever makes everyone happy. And I think I like the way you said about like every lie makes you weaker. Also, I think every lie you tell makes you that much more not yourself, right? Every lie is like it's covering up who you are, and it's pretending that you're something that you're not, and it's corroding you and your soul. And I think that you can feel a lot more meaning and purpose in life if you can tell fewer lies, if you can be more honest. And obviously, like, when it comes to coming out and being being honest about like your religious beliefs, that can have a lot of things that get in the way of it. Like, maybe you're married to someone who's really all in, there's a lot of things that can make that difficult. So I'm not trying to minimize it, but what I am trying to do is to I guess, point out the potential dangers of lying too long, right? Because I don't
Yeah.
think it's good for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's okay, I want to tag one thing on the end of that,
Please,
which is
please.
just don't like, I would hate for somebody to leave this conversation and say, I'm going to go tell my family right now, even if they're not ready to tell them. Like, there's a point of time where you probably need to work through some things, as we're talking about, like informing your family or coming clean to your family, or whatever we want to call it, being brutally honest with where you are and what you think about those beliefs. I would hate for somebody to go and do it before they're ready, because they think it's a lie to withhold it at all. There's kind of a really fine balance between, like, I'm telling my family for them because I feel like I'm lying to them, and I want to tell my family because it feels wrong to me now. And
Yeah.
I really only side with people doing what feels right inside of them. I could give two shits about what the outside pressure is telling you to do.
Exactly.
So I love this conversation, and I just want to make sure that it doesn't come across that I'm saying go tell your family now because you're lying if you don't. I want to say,
Yeah.
make sure you're ready, and then tell whoever you feel needs to know. But you're telling them for you.
Yeah, I love that. Do it for you, right? And of course, it's not like you have to tell everybody, but I do think I think what gets in the way of us telling people is we're worried about how they're going to react, and then we feel guilty. And I think that the reason we worry about how they're going to react is because oftentimes when you grow up in a high demand religion, you have very damaged self-worth and self-esteem, so you really rely on other people's opinion of you to uphold like this like I'm a good person, like uphold this standard. And so the fear with that is, like, if they don't think I'm a good person, I can't handle that, right? But guess what? Learn to handle it, right? You need to learn to handle it. Don't not tell them because of that, right? And then the other thing is guilt, and that guilt is rough because you don't want your parents to be upset and to be hurting and to whatever, your parents, your kids, your siblings, your spouse, and it will make you feel guilty. But I think the thing to remember here too is that guilt is intended for us to feel when we've done something wrong. Being honest is not something that's wrong, right?
Right.
And if it hurts, and if honesty hurts someone's feelings, that's okay. That's okay. And you need to let them hurt, right? It's okay for them to be sad. It's okay for them to hurt. Let them hurt. Like, give them that permission. Give yourself that space. Anyway, that's kind of my soapbox about that. So back to Jordan Peterson.
Woo! JP, let's go.
Okay, one second here.
I often talk to people who are trying to make a difficult life decision, and they are weighing out the costs and the benefits of making the life decision. And one of the things I always talk to them about is, wait a second, that's an incomplete analysis. You have to weigh out the benefits and the costs of doing this, and you have to weigh out the costs and benefits of not doing it. And that's not the same as the zero that you assume that you're starting with, right? Because to not make a decision, it also has a cost. And sometimes the cost of not making a decision is far worse than the cost of making a decision, even if the decision is risky. And so one of the things you can derive from that, and this is very useful, I think, is that this is also, I think, why it's so useful to contemplate your mortality, so to speak, is you're screwed no matter what you do. And that actually frees you, is that you have path A that has catastrophes, and you have path B that has catastrophes, and you don't get to have the no catastrophe path, but you get to pick which one. And that's really something, because if you know that there's terrible risk associated with everything that you do and don't do, then you can afford to take some risks, because you're not, and this is all within the arc metaphor. I'm still making the case that despite the fact that your life is essentially catastrophic, you can make a covenant with the highest ideal, and that will take you through it the best way possible. I'm still making that case.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there for a second. You're screwed no matter what.
Yep.
I find that so inspiring.
Oh yeah. Oh dear, am I comforted right now.
Okay, it's funny, but like okay, this whole concept, right, is realizing that oftentimes we think about the cost of how is my family going to react? But we don't think about the cost of what toll is this going to take on me if I keep lying to everyone and going to church to keep everyone else happy. And you know what I mean? And we don't think about that. We don't think about that cost. We don't, and you know, and like this is a big deal in relationships too, because sometimes we don't want to be honest, like with our partner or whatever. And we think like it'll cause a fight. It'll cause like, they'll get their feelings hurt, whatever. But then we don't think about long-term, all that resentment that's building up and all of the issues that keep piling up on top of other issues. And so the whole message here is becoming aware that whatever risky choice you may be avoiding because you're afraid may actually be creating a bigger problem that you've never thought of. Hit me with what you got, Ubermormon.
Okay, so which Harry Potter is it where Harry comes across Voldemort right before Wormtail? Is it number 4 where Wormtail cuts his hand into that cauldron and Voldemort is just like a little like withering piece of himself? Like he looks like a baby and then he like drops him into the cauldron.
Yes.
So
I know what you're talking about. Yes, I don't know which.
You become when you lie. I think it's the Goblet of Fire because he finishes the last maze and then the guy who plays Edward is there and he dies. Spoiler alert. And then that's when Harry fights Voldemort and he comes back and he tells everybody like he's back, right? It's number 4. Right. So like that's what you become when you are just like you're just withering away in little lies. And I did this. I had a really, really close friend who was he's like a loan banker. He does commercial loans. Doesn't matter. I had a question for him about I was like, hey, if you made your life 1% better every day for a year, if we use like interest rate, like let's use, I forget what it's called, compounding interest. If we use the theory of compounding interest, just how good would your life be after a year of making it 1% better every day? And he was like, oh, that's a really interesting question. So assuming that, I wrote it down because the number was way higher than you think. Because first of all, 1% every day is not 365% over a year because it's increasing, right? So like you're doing 1% of more every day. That's compounding interest. So we did the math, and assuming that you're starting at 100%, which none of us are, okay, but assuming that you're starting at 100%, at the end of the year, your life would be, and here's the number, are you ready? 3,678% better. Okay. And I'm pretty sure that with compounding interest, that works both ways. So if you make your life 1% worse every day for a year, then you make it 3,000 times worse.
Oh my God.
And you're worse than Voldemort. You're like a little raisin baby. You're nothing. So
oh my God.
That's what I think of. Like when you're trying to imagine who's that version of you that has to deal with all these consequences, it's not even you. It's a worse version of you. I don't know.
I love it. I love it. Since we're on Harry Potter metaphors, I think it was also Jordan Peterson I heard talk about, it's the second Harry Potter, spoiler alert, where it's the basilisk, right?
Yeah.
How do you say it? I say it weird.
I think you said it fine.
It's this whole idea of there's this monster lurking underneath in the tunnel, like underground tunnels, this big snake monster under the tunnels of the school. And Harry Potter, the main character, has to go and fight this. Thank you. The main character.
His last name. I got you. I got you.
The main character of Harry Potter, he goes. He has to go to the place he most doesn't want to go and face the monster he most doesn't want to face in order to save the school. Right. And to be the hero of the story. Right. And the interesting thing about this is that I think we got a fan here for you. Do you see that?
I see that. I love this fan.
I agree with this comment. And you got to go to the place you most don't want to go, fight the demons you most don't want to defeat in order to move forward. Right. And like you said, I love the compound interest thing. Because it's that idea of like, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse, and the
Mhm.
worseness is compounding, which
Yes.
I was just watching a video the other day about your comfort zone and how if you don't expand your comfort zone over time, it actually shrinks,
Mm.
which blew my mind because it's literally like, I don't know if you ever heard this, but like in Mormonism, they'd always tell you, like, if you don't work on your testimony, it
Mm.
will just go
Mm.
away. Like it's like a
Yep.
treadmill. You have to keep working at it. But this is true with now my brother is on here, like he's trying to show up your
Parker is
your
also
fan.
right. Hey, it's fine.
we got some good fans tonight.
Some
Okay, so
dedicated homies.
I know. Okay, so your comfort zone is shrinking over time. And I found this so interesting because we don't want to leave our comfort zone. Our comfort zone is where we're comfortable. But what we don't
Right.
know is that when you're not thinking about it, your comfort zone over time is shrinking. How much, you're willing to socialize, how much you're willing to push yourself at work or with your projects or with your whatever you've got going on in life over time. Your comfort zone is going to shrink and you will get weaker. And I think this feels so counterintuitive to me because I just generally assume people just get better with time because they experience more life. And that's just not always the case. People do not
Right.
always get better over time. I do, but not everyone is me. So,
Yeah. We're kind of in a toilet bowl of entropy at the moment, and things are just spinning out of control. There's I don't remember his first name, and I'm so sorry. His last name was Zygotsky. Zygotsky. I think that's his name. I will I don't know how to put anything in the description, and it'll probably be wrong when I do. So maybe I'll just text it to you afterwards. But
Thank you. I
he was
will.
the guy who developed like the zone of proximal development, and he had this theory of scaffolding as it relates to helping toddlers and helping kids kind of grow up socially. So what his theory on scaffolding was that the quickest way for a toddler or a young adult or somebody to kind of make social development increases in their cognitive abilities was to deal with them. Let's say that this teenager is dealing with these abilities. So the adult would deal with them with these abilities. So they're 25% out of their comfort zone, 25% in their comfort zone. That doesn't equal 100%. So maybe make those 50 and 50. But the idea is that you're kind of pulling them up because you're right above what they're comfortable with. And it works the same way with language as well. Like when you're talking to little kids, you're trying to get them to learn how to talk, you'll use just words that are barely out of reach, well, within reach, but barely out of their vocabulary. And they'll grab onto those and they'll understand them in context. And then their vocabulary increases. So yeah, the zone of when you're in the zone, when you're in your comfort zone, or when you're trying to help somebody leave their comfort zone, you want to deal with them. You don't want to like, they're here and you're like, oh, well, here's some of this stuff right here. It's like, no. Yeah. This is like a weird dance move now. But you want to be like just in their window, but out of their window as well. So they have some space to grow into. It's like, what are those turtles, those box turtles that will grow in comparison to the space that they live in?
Yes.
Yes,
I've
it's
heard
exactly
of that.
like that.
I've heard of
So
that.
if you give them like intellectual and emotional space to spread out and put down roots and grow. I know turtles don't have roots, but I'm talking like 4 metaphors here. If you if you give somebody the emotional space to kind of know that they're being listened to, and then also they can grow into that. I've lost my train of thought entirely. I was trying to remember what we started talking about, like why we got to the comfort zone. Anyways, I'm saying like be in their zone, but a little bit out of their zone. That's the summary version. All right.
Sorry, and do that with yourself, right? Like try to push yourself just a little bit out of that comfort zone. And I think one good way to illustrate this is to pay attention to like how do you define success in life, right? How do you define what a successful life is? And I think that so many of us were taught to define it by how much money you're making, what career you have, like your power, your status, your whatever, and that's not the way I want to define success in my life. I want to define success by I'm steadily improving. I'm improving my abilities, my communication skills, my, critical thinking skills. I'm improving my ability to be present with my kids and my friends. I'm improving my work-life balance. Like I want, I want to measure my success in those ways. And in order for me to measure success in those ways, honesty comes out as a really big value for me. And the reason why honesty is so important is because I can't have healthy connection with people if I'm not being honest. So how can I better put fear behind me so that I can continue to propel myself forward to live what, I define as a successful life? Did you want to say anything else about that before I click back over?
No, I think you nailed it.
True.
True.
Okay. Here we
the
go.
biggest self 5 ever.
Thanks
yeah,
for
I'm
noticing.
awesome.
Hell yeah. I mean,
So-
heck. Excuse me.
So then you think, okay, well, I'm trying to make this decision. I'm going to go try to do something difficult. And isn't that terrifying? And then you think, yeah, but wait a minute. What's really terrifying is not doing it. And then you think about the cost of not doing it. So in the future authoring program, we have people do this little meditative exercise, which is, okay, just think about your insufficiencies by your own definition, right? The way that you don't do what you know you should do. About the things that you do that you shouldn't do, that you know you shouldn't do beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? There's some things like that. And that's bad habits and poor aim and all of the resentment and hatred and aggression and unresolved conflicts and all those things. They're dementing you and warping you, and then think, okay, those things get the upper hand, man. They get the upper hand and they take you the worst possible place you could go in the next 3 to 5 years. What exactly does that look like? And so you sketch all that out and you think, hey, I don't want to go there. And so the next time that a temptation comes up, you think, well, it'd be a lot better for me if I didn't succumb to this temptation. It's like, that's kind of weak, eh? You'd look a little better if you didn't eat like a cheesecake a day or something like that. That's something, but it's not the same as I'm going to have diabetes and I'm going to lose my damn leg in 5 years if I don't get my eating under control. That's motivating. And so then the temptation comes along and you think, oh, how about no? Seriously, how about no? Not just because a higher good would be obtained if I avoided it, but because a terrible catastrophe would be averted if I didn't. And so, so you want to get your fear behind you, right? You want to get it behind you where it's pushing you forward instead of in front of you where it's stopping you. And you get your fear behind you, pushing you forward by actually thinking through the consequences of not putting your life together. And the least of those is that you waste it and suffer, right? Because you're going to suffer anyways, man. So you waste it and suffer. That's a bad deal. Because maybe if you're going to suffer, you could at least do something noble and glorious and upright and powerful and honorable and admirable and helpful and difficult. That's just so much better. And maybe that's good enough so that you think, hey, little suffering, it's basically worth it. At least it's a way forward.
Okay, so.
Forever the optimist, this guy, right? You're going to suffer either way. Positivity 101.
Ironically, I find his pessimism so inspiring.
I know. I feel the same way.
I know. It's just so funny. Oh, I got a shout out to Thug because this is a Patreon supporter. Thank you so much. Parker said, couldn't this be considered negative reinforcement? I don't know much about positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement, so I have no idea how to define that. My understanding of positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement has to do with like actions, like when you're trying to punish a child or something, like, you smack their hand away from the stove, versus giving them a cookie when they don't touch the stove.
Right.
I don't know that it's applicable to this, but I don't know. What I do want to say is you're going to suffer no matter what. If you're going to suffer no matter what, wouldn't you rather suffer knowing that you tried to do some really cool things? You tried to be yourself. You tried to improve yourself. You tried to live your life honestly and the way that you wanted to. And it's not that easy, right? Because we can sit here and we can say like, just do it. But there's so many fears that come up, right? But just being aware of those fears is a huge first step. What you got, man?
Yeah. So, who is this? Parker? Yeah. Okay. Somebody's going to say it. Perfect. I was going to say that. Sorry. Negative reinforcement. It's an operant conditioning term. Essentially, you're adding a stimulus to increase a behavior, or you're taking away a stimulus to decrease a behavior. I wouldn't necessarily say this is like negative reinforcement, but like it's a way to motivate yourself. It's not a bad way to think about it. So the other thing that I love about well, okay, so he did mention self-offering, so I didn't have to do the free Jordan Peterson plug at the beginning of this because he just mentioned the whole program. But I think it's interesting here. We talk about like you're screwed either way. It reminds me of the Jim Carrey quote where he's like, he's talking to his dad. It's super famous, but I'm gonna misquote it because I don't remember it. But he says, like, wouldn't you want to fail trying to do something that you loved instead of trying to do something that you didn't care about? It's the exact same idea here.
Yeah.
But this idea of like grabbing the fear and putting it behind you, it's like visually it's cool because like you have to grab something that you're terrified of and you have to tell it to like, no, you go over here. And so you're really taking control of things that you don't want to take control of. But I think it's important when we're talking about things that we are scared of to kind of contextualize, like, there are some things that you will be so afraid of that you will freeze and you will do nothing. Like,
Yeah.
because like imagine like a rat doing this to a snake. You know, like, hey, you're in front of me, but you better be behind me, you son of a bitch. Like, it can't control that. That's too big of a fear for it. So it's like, how can we start with the smaller fears and work our way up to the bigger fears? But also like we need the right amount of fear behind us, because so I sent you earlier this week. There's something called polyvagal theory that you thought was a joke about Joseph Smith's wives, which was hilarious. It works better as a joke, honestly. But polyvagal theory.
Yes, I'm familiar with it now. I did look into it.
It's an interesting theory. Essentially what it is, it divides your nervous system into 3 parts, and it says, here's your happy part, and here's your fight or flight part, and here's your freeze part. And since we do share nervous system with other prey mammals, we do have that freeze part, and we've all been there, right? Like I dropped out of college like 5 years ago because I froze so bad for like a month that I didn't do any of my homework or any of my quizzes, and I just failed all my classes. And then I was like, all right, I guess college just isn't for me. And so like freezing is a really, really, it's a real thing. And so kind of how would I say this?
I've got a good way to demonstrate it. You've got your comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
You've got your comfort zone, okay? Then you have your proximal growth region, right? Right outside your comfort zone is the maximum growth space. And then right outside of that is the I'm shutting down, it's like debilitating, right? So, and that's why people are afraid to step out of their comfort zone, because you go too far into the red, you burn out, maybe you get hurt, maybe something bad happens. And so it's finding that balance, right? Of how can you put that fear behind you, and then also make sure that you're moving forward, but not moving forward too quickly that you can't keep up with it, or that it's more detrimental than it is helpful. Is that where you were going, kind of?
You said it so much better than I was going to say it, so thank you.
Yeah. I have a tendency to do that. I generally take what people are saying and just say it way better than what they could say.
Yes, so you do.
I got your back.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
There's this other idea of like this comment. Yep. So
Relatable.
there's this other idea of like, so if you're living a life of no stress whatsoever, that's not a good thing. Like, that's not enough stress. I was listening to, there's a comedian who I love. His name's Pete Holmes. He has a podcast, and he was talking about how when he needs enough stress in his life that when a joke comes to his head and he's like all snuggled up and he's in bed and he's ready to fall asleep, he has enough angst to like, yeah, I need to get out of bed and I need to write this down right now. Otherwise, I'm going to forget it. Like, he doesn't want to be so calm that he's like, nah, I'll remember that in the morning, because then he never does. And so you can think of anxiety as something that like happens on a bell curve, right? So too little anxiety, very bad thing. Too much anxiety, very bad thing. A
Yeah.
little bit of anxiety in the middle, super, super good thing, because a life with no stress or anxiety is called boring life. A life with a little bit of stress and anxiety is called stimulus. And that's a good thing for us. It keeps us going.
Yeah. See, I love this. And the important thing here is to realize that it's not so important where you're at as where you're going, right?
Yeah.
Because like this comment I left, I freeze like a popsicle when I get overwhelmed. I love that. And I very much relate to that. In high school, I was having panic attacks several times a week. If I had tried to start a YouTube channel back then, probably would have been so far out of my comfort zone, I would have quit very quickly, right? And so you have to take it step by step. My lighting's getting weird here, so I'm trying to adjust. You got to take it step by step. What you got to do is you got to be like, first of all, you got to accept where you're at, right? You got to accept like where you're at, because it's really easy for us to be like, oh, I can never do these things because look how far ahead these people are. It's like, no, just focus on where are you at right now, because that's where you're at. You can't change it. And then say, where do I want to go? And what's one tiny step that will take me to that? And if you can start to break it down that way, you can make incredible changes. And like you said, that 1% change will compound insanely fast. And I've seen that in my life, because after having a second kid, it really destroyed me, because I felt like I was already burnt out, already overwhelmed. And then we threw a second kid on top. So it really forced me to learn to put some more systems in place and some ways of dealing with my life better. And what I noticed was it just started off with little things. And when I could get these little things situated, I could add more things. So just start small. Could be something like, if your house is a mess, right? Start with something so small that's like, I'm going to not go to bed until the sink is empty every single night. Just start with something small. When you see that you can be successful with that small thing, add something else. And that can, you can apply that to a lot of things. Yeah.
It reminds me of the kind of the mythological, maybe go and kill the dragon while he's a baby instead of waiting till he's 30 years old and hates your town, and is going to breathe fire on all your friends. Like, hey, what if we just went and like made an omelet with that dragon egg? Like, just kill it while it's small. I think about this. So I live in Utah, and there's I-15. Like, when you're coming around the point of the mountain, guess what? Your windshield's going to get cracked. It just is. That's what happens every time I drive on that road at like 9 a.m. in the morning.
You need like a second windshield to protect the main windshield.
I need like 10 windshields. If Elon Musk, if you're listening, we need 9 more windshields.
Just bulletproof. Bulletproof windshield is what you need when you're in Utah.
What I really need is just a metal front and then just a camera on the outside. And then if a rock happens to hit that camera and I'm blind, I deserve to die. That's just it's in the cards for me. There is a God and he wants me to die. That's what is happening there. A windshield squared.
Windshield shield. Oh my God.
Oh man. Okay,
sorry, you were saying, I think you might have been talking about acceptance or something. I'm not sure.
So what I was trying to say before we got distracted by our next genius invention was...
Yeah, we need to patent that.
Yeah, nobody steal this. You heard it here first. So it got to a point, like, I think so mythologically now, a rock would bounce off of one of these stupid trucks that drops rocks for a living. I'm pretty sure that's the only reason that anybody drives them, is to leave trails of bouncing rocks behind them.
No, it's those damn windshield companies. They pay the rock guys to go around and just spill rocks everywhere.
The problem at the end of the day is big windshield.
It's like all those dentists investing in candy companies.
Yeah, exactly. So
I'm just kidding. Okay, go ahead.
So it got to a point where like I would get these, and I would get them like once a month. And like, if you have insurance, it's free to get it filled, right? But it takes you forever to get it filled. And then if you wait too long, you need a new windshield, right? It got to a point, I think so mythologically, where like a rock hits my thing and I'm like, that is a dragon egg right there. And I need to kill it now before it turns into a big angry dragon and ruins my whole windshield. So like, even like that's a real world example of like taking a tiny little problem and saying, hey, I think I might solve this while it's small, because last I checked, bad news doesn't necessarily get better with age, and it's just gonna like destroy me in a couple months or when winter comes. And maybe it's silly to take something that minute and like turn it into a little baby dragon, but guess what? I got all of those fixed and they were happening monthly, and I still have my original windshield. So like, it worked. All I'm saying is it worked.
I think you can apply this pretty effectively when it comes to like you as a person, because you can sit here and you can realize like, okay, maybe I have a problem with procrastination, or I have a problem with communication, right? Or I have a problem, whatever, like my house has, like there's a leak, you know, and just to realize like something that seems small at first over time gets worse. So the faster you can nip it in the bud, the better. And I love, in Jordan Peterson's book, he talks about, saying no it's not just like something that we have a hard time saying, but it's something that takes like active retraining. So if you're like a people pleaser like me and you're saying yes all the time, it takes actual practice of saying no to actually get good or even know how to say no. And so like just keeping in mind that saying, you know, how these things can explode over time is that you may live your whole life just trying to please everybody else, when really those aren't the things you want to do. Those aren't the places you want to eat. Those aren't the shows you want to watch. Those aren't the people you want to hang out with. And before you know it, your life is over and you've spent it doing all these things you didn't really want to do. And one other thing I'll say about that is that I think a lot of us growing up in a high demand religion, we never really learned who we were or what we wanted. Yeah. So there's this like, well, I'm doing these things that, you know, other people want to do. I don't really want to do them, but I don't know what I want to do. So this is fine, you know. Right. But I think that it's a beautiful thing to start looking within, figuring out, well, what do you want? And if you wanted something, what do you think it would be? And just like trying to explore that. Now, the dragon thing, I got to say something about that before we go on, because I love the metaphor of the dragon, right? And taking it out when it's small. I was watching Shrek the other day. It's a classic. Yes. And the whole premise of Shrek, right? You got Farquaad, douchebag that sends Shrek off to do his dirty work, right? He sends this ogre off to go get his princess that's in the tower guarded by the dragon, right? Shrek goes, makes it out barely alive, but he saves the princess and takes her back to Farquaad. Okay, fast forward to the wedding. Farquaad and Fiona are getting married, and what ends up happening is that as they're standing there in the chapel getting married, the dragon, the one that Shrek, went to face before, he didn't end up killing the dragon, right? He just ended up kind of getting her out of there. The dragon busts through the window of the chapel and just swoops down and eats Farquaad. Like, there was no warning. There was no chance to fight back. Just boom, jumps in, eats him in one whole bite. And the irony of this is that if he had faced the dragon in the beginning of the movie, he might have stayed alive, right? He
Farquaad. Might have stayed You're alive. Talking about Farquaad, right?
Yes. Okay, because Farquaad sent Shrek to face his dragon, right? Because he wanted the princess. And if he had gone and faced the dragon from the beginning, it wouldn't have had that opportunity to just swoop in and kill him out of nowhere. If he had gone and faced it of his own volition, he could have brought armies with him. He could have come prepared. He could have had the best chance of success to fight that dragon. But when he's standing there in the chapel, and that dragon comes after him, it's hopeless, right? Once that little windshield crack splits, it's all over. You got to get a new windshield. There's no going back.
Exactly. Well, okay, so that's interesting because I guess there are kind of two options here. You can, well, there are, I got to stop speaking in dichotomies because I'll say like there are two options and then I'll say like 10 different outcomes that are possible. Okay, but what I want to say here is you could kill the dragon while it's a baby, or you could get the dragon on your team, which is kind of what happens for Shrek and Donkey. Right? So like you could, I think that's like a perfect weird example of putting this fear behind you, is like they're going to fight this dragon. And instead of killing the dragon and instead of being beaten by the dragon, they get the dragon to join their team. And now whenever they need any like dragon favors, like it just does it for them, right? And it's kind of like this idea in video games when you like, I'm not very good at video games, but like when you beat a monster, usually you like absorb all of his life and get all of his points, and now you're as strong as you plus the monster. It's like when Dwight says that he like absorbed his twin in utero or something. I now have the strength of a grown man.
And a fetus, yeah.
Yeah, and a baby. But like it kind of works for you like that in this whole like you're constantly improving, you're constantly like increasing your life by 1%, you're constantly becoming better. It's like when you beat that dragon, it's not necessarily that you kill it, it's that now it's on your team and now it's fighting your battles with you, and that's way more powerful.
I think that this could be applied, and you can tell me how you were thinking it would be applied, but I think the idea is like, okay, so let's say like the monster is like procrastination, right? And if you can instead learn how to be someone who doesn't procrastinate, is that kind of like bringing the dragon onto your team? Because that is incredibly powerful, right? And to see it from that point. And I think the powerful, because I've done that exercise, the one Jordan Peterson is talking about, where it's like you imagine your life, you pick a problem you have, right? Maybe it's leaving a high demand religion, maybe it's your procrastination, maybe it's your communications problems or relationship problems or whatever. Pick a problem and then imagine if you did nothing about that problem, how your life would look 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And then compare that to how your life would look 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if you actually did something to fix that problem. And it really illustrates for you, it makes real that danger zone of doing nothing, so that you can put that fear behind you, so that you can try to lessen the other fears that are kind of stopping you from moving forward. So I love that exercise. I think it's really powerful. And I think when I feel stuck, I try to remind myself, like, there's a way to get through this. And I can motivate myself by reminding myself the cost of not dealing with this issue.
Yeah. That's exactly how I would have said it. It occurs to me now, so I'm backtracking like 10 minutes probably, but like it should be called a rock shield, not a windshield. I'm just gonna put that out there. Windshield, like that's not the biggest threat when you're driving. Why are we so concerned about shielding the wind? I don't know. I know I've left the realm of what we were talking about, but I keep looking at this comment that says windshield shield, and I'm like, yeah, but rock shield is just better.
Yes, we should make sure to try to get that changed. We'll put in a petition for that.
I'm gonna speak to the manager.
The dictionary.
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing I wanted to say about this. I think I had kind of a cool metaphor about it in my mind earlier when I was thinking about, you got fear, right? And fear specifically, like, that's like, for me, a big fear, just being very much a people pleaser, was fear of what other people thought of me, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, if in life you're driving a car, it's like you're driving and you see all these roads ahead of you, right? And you have a choice. You can turn this way, you can turn this way, whatever. But then all of a sudden, you see like fear down a certain path of like, oh, someone's going to react this kind of way or whatever. You're afraid of something. Maybe like you're afraid to, quit your job and go back to school. Unlike the Ubermormon who is fearless. And like you're afraid. And so you turn the wheel away from fear. Like Jordan Peterson mentioned, we're more motivated by negative emotions than we are by positive ones. So you turn the wheel away. And what ends up happening is that you're letting fear steer which way you go. And is that what you really want to be doing? do you really want fear to be in the driver's seat?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're talking about people pleasing, Brene Brown has like a brilliant way, because she claims to be a huge people pleaser as well. Although something tells me that she kind of got over that. But
At
she
least a little
talks about,
bit.
at least a little bit, right? She talks about how, first of all, boundaries are crazy important. You should know exactly how far you're willing to put kind of somebody else's well-being in comparison to yours. And I guess a rule of thumb for me, when I was leaving the church, I kept asking myself the question, like, because I knew it would be frustrating and difficult and kind of heartbreaking for my parents when they found out that I didn't think the same way that they did anymore. But I had to keep reminding myself, like, if I'm putting their emotional well-being above my own emotional well-being, then like I'm kind of emotionally manipulating myself. And if they are putting their emotional, like if I remember there was one example where I was like, they made it very clear that their feelings on the matter were more important than my feelings on the matter. And I was like, oh, okay, so that's not right. That's an unhealthy boundary. And when we within religions like Mormonism, we're not taught what a healthy boundary is. So like we will go into a bishop's office and we will tell him the last time we masturbated, and we don't even think twice about like, this is a weird invasion of privacy, but it totally is. But we've just been conditioned to think this is normal. And so we go with it. So anyway, back to Brene Brown. She has this mantra that she says when people are asking her to do something and her reflex is telling her say yes, say yes, say yes. She has this little ring on her finger that she spins around, and she says, choose discomfort over resentment. Choose discomfort over resentment. And she repeats it 3 times. And that is crazy powerful, because even when you are like, let's say you're in an argument with your spouse, or you're in an argument with your family, or you feel like I need to bite my tongue here because I don't want to hurt their feelings, and I'm willing to risk hurting my own feelings, or I'm willing to tell a little lie, like a little white lie, by like kind of contradicting my own internal moral compass and just saying something that will make them happy right now. That is people pleasing right now. And here's the thing, you're going to be resentful about that. You're going to go home, and in the car, you're going to be like, I should have just told them what I felt. I should have just spoken my mind, because now I'm mad at myself for not saying it. And there was a guy I used to work with, and the whole time I worked with him for like a year, and the whole time that he worked there, he felt like he deserved a raise, and he never once asked for one. He would just make like snide comments here and there. And eventually it got to a point where he like made a big scene and told the boss that they weren't paying us enough, and kind of made a stink. And then things were awkward for like 3 days. And then he was mean to all of us. And then he left and got a worse job. And what I learned from that experience was, if you just keep if you don't speak your needs, if you don't say, like, people aren't going to read your mind. So if you don't speak your needs, you think that you're mad at your boss or your partner or your parents for not doing the things that you want them to do. But it won't be the case. You'll be mad at yourself for not saying what you needed to say. You'll be more upset that you knew exactly what you wanted and you knew exactly what you needed, and you didn't give anybody a chance to help you fill that hole. And so that's a really powerful thing for me. It took me like 25 years to learn that if I don't say what I want, nobody else knows what I want. And it sounds stupid, but like I needed somebody to hit me over the head with it. And I needed to watch that happen at work before I could say, oh, wow, so people can't just read my mind. I have to say it or I'm going to hate myself. I don't hate any of them. I'm going to hate myself.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like, okay, you have this whole like,
I'm going to turn my light on because it got so dark.
Oh yeah, of course. You have this opportunity, right, to say what you really think or what you really want. And oftentimes we don't. And I think it comes back to what you were talking about with putting other, you have this, like, we've been conditioned to put other people's feelings and issues and concerns above our own. And then we play this dangerous game of like our needs aren't getting met because everyone else's are way more important. Everyone's feelings and issues and whatever are more important. So then we are getting resentful. We don't have our needs getting met. And then we start, like you said, being passive aggressive, lashing out. And the problem with this too is that we get mad at people for not reading our minds. Yeah. We will literally start getting mad at people because we'll be like, I have these needs that aren't getting met. And we're getting mad at them that they don't know what they are because we're too insecure, or maybe we don't understand how to get our needs met or what they are or whatever. So like just becoming aware of what you need, what you want, and then asking for it, you know, in kind ways, and, you know, and also being respectful of when people can't give you those things. It's all super important. We are on the craziest, most awesome tangents. I want to come back to fear again. Fear of risk taking. Yes. And here's the thought I have is certainty. Okay. We all want certainty. We want it so bad that we will believe things that aren't true, right? Like, for example, a high demand religion or whatever. And the problem with this whole wanting certainty is that it will keep you boxed in, because certainty is not realistic. And the reason that it's not realistic is because you cannot control anything outside of yourself. You cannot. You can't control what catastrophes happen. You can't control what the people in your life do. You can try to control them. You can try to manipulate them and it won't work eventually, you know, and or if it does work, it's very unhealthy. You can't control these things, right? There's so much you can't control. You can't control how your parents see you, how they treat you. You think you can control it. You can pretend to control it, but you can't actually control it. So I think one really big piece of advice that would have really helped me when I was leaving Mormonism would have been to try to let go of that need for certainty and replace that with trying to get more confident in my ability to be resilient. Because what I can't do is control what's happening around me and what people think of me. What I can do is try to become strong enough and confident enough to navigate whatever happens. And then you have, you know, coming back to that example of you've got the roads, right? And you've got these different roads you're going down. And the fear is someone's going to judge me. Someone's going to be upset with me. Or I'm going to make a mistake, right? And I'm so afraid that I'm going to make a mistake. I'm just going to stop the car, right? Yeah. And if you bring in that understanding of certainty here, then you realize like, yes, I don't know what's going to happen down this road. And yes, there might be massive potholes, but I am more afraid of keeping this car stuck than I am of guaranteeing myself certainty, which it just isn't possible. Right. Yeah. So yeah.
I think that's perfectly said. James Fowler's stages of faith go over like acceptance of uncertainty. And I did a video on this. It's called like Leaving the Mormon Church ? Or something like that. But it goes over the 6 stages of human development in relation to spirituality. And I want to say it's stage 5 says you accept kind of uncertainty as a part of life, and you're not bothered by the mysteries of life anymore. And it also says something along the lines of you begin to understand that things don't necessarily have to be logical. And like, if you want to track kind of just leaving a high demand religion in general, there's a point where you're like, now I'm a staunch atheist because everything has to make perfect sense. Everything has to be like, it's black and white, and there either is a God or there isn't a God, and there is absolute truth. And I only believe, I remember there was a YouTuber who I used to listen to a lot when I was leaving who would say, I only want to believe true things. And at the time, I remember listening to that and thinking like, wow, what a good way of saying that. And now I'm like, how do you know, what do you mean by true? How do you know that you believe true things? You know what I mean?
I agree.
But it's like, so understand, like leaving a high demand religion is scary. It is, there's going to be fear all over the place. You're going to be afraid to do it. You're going to be afraid to not do it. You have to look inside yourself and ask, like, what's the most authentic version of me? What would that person do in this scenario? You kind of have to get into this idea of like, what was I meant for? Like telos. Who am I? What was I meant for? Does this align with my purpose? And for some people it does. You know what I mean? So we always say, well, we don't always say, and it's not always a we, but I hear a lot in the ex-Mormon community, people say things like, I just want people to be able to know all of the problems with the church so they can make an informed decision about it. And then we see podcasters who like know all the problems with the church and still want to be a part of it. And then we're mad at them. And we're like, isn't this exactly what we said we're fine with? I don't understand. It's such a double standard. It's like, just be okay with the fact that for some people, this just adds value to their life, and that's fine. And if for you it doesn't, which for me it didn't, that's good too. It's your life. You have to be the one who's guiding it forward. And so I don't know. There are so many things to be afraid of when you're leaving the Mormon church, and I would hate to like not validate every single one of them, because if it's true for somebody and it makes them feel uncomfortable, then that's a part of reality. But like it's also an important, you have to be able to see yourself as the type of person who can deal with fears, and hopefully those fears get bigger and bigger over time, because otherwise you don't really know if you're growing as a person.
I like what you said about the whole, we get mad at them even when they know it all and they still like stay Mormon. And I think
I was subtweeting Midnight Mormons when I said that, by the way, because everyone hates them. And I'm like, but they know all the issues and they want to be Mormon. So like, what's our problem with those guys?
I think that the reason, and this is me just, guessing. I think that the reason that ex-Mormons will get so mad at them is because it invalidates their experience.
Definitely.
Right? They're like, if you had really learned it right, you would have done the same thing as me. And so I think it could possibly be touching on an insecurity. I think that, sorry, I'm laughing at Jared because
I saw that too.
Oh my God. Yeah. Anyway, that totally threw off my train of thought. Thank you, Jared.
Super helpful comments. I also feel attacked by the Windshields, like the Utah-centric classism. I'm sorry if I've committed some grave sin about just thinking that the name, like all I'm saying is I'm not that worried about the wind when I'm driving. Okay, it's kind of the last thing on my mind.
I guess if you didn't have a windshield, the wind would be inconvenient, but the rocks flying into your eyes would be
deadly.
Terrible. Deadly. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Depending on how fast that windshield truck full of rocks is driving. The windshield company owned truck.
Yeah.
Oh man. Anyway. Okay. All right. Closing thoughts on fear, putting your fear behind you, moving forward. I think it's important, of course, to, take little steps. I feel like it's totally transformed my life. Just little steps of getting my life a little bit more organized and sticking with it. And it just like that success begets more success. And I think that a lot of us start to get into this pattern where like, okay, like January, New Year's, right? New Year's resolutions. Here we go. Everyone's hitting the gym for 3 weeks. And then everyone's back to sitting on the couch eating, Taco Bell. And I think that the reason that happens is because people try to change too much too fast, and that it's better, like you said, to just change one little thing than to try to do too much and then fail. And the problem is when you try to do something new and you fail at it, you start to confirm a bias in your mind that you're not capable of change. that you're not capable of doing difficult things. And that confirmation bias will make it that much harder the next time you want to try to make a positive change. Anyway, you know, food for thought.
Yeah, definitely. So I have two thoughts really quickly. My old boss used to always tell us this story about like, he was a big manufacturing guy, and he would, at the beginning of every meeting, we met once a week, and he would ask us what problems we saw and what problems we thought needed to be fixed. And there were like the first 4 weeks of the meeting, like we would all just walk in there and be like, nope, no problems, everything's great. And after 4 weeks of everybody saying no problems, he was like, okay, so here's my issue with none of you noticing any problems. There are problems. Like there's no way I'm going to believe you when you all come in here and tell me that we're operating at 100%. And it doesn't mean that it's your fault if you notice a problem, but it is your fault if you're not noticing any problems. Like, come on, guys. And so that was like a big wake up call for me. Like, oh, noticing that things are going wrong, like noticing failure in yourself, doesn't mean that you're a failure. First of all, give yourself like a good old pat on the back for noticing that you did something wrong. You know what I mean? Like, that is self-awareness. Ding, ding, ding. But the other thing that I want to say on a way more serious note is when it comes to like overcoming fear, I think that this is where, like, whatever you think about God, whatever you think about the Bible and Jesus and all of that, like, here we have a story about a guy who did the thing that he didn't want to do above all. Like, it was the last thing that he wanted to do. And that act justifies the suffering of existence. And so it's like, atonement is like, hey, maybe if you could just like overcome the biggest sacrifice that you could possibly overcome, maybe that would make your life worth it. Not just to you, but to like everyone around you. And maybe other people watching you do that, maybe it would make them think, I bet I could be pushing myself a little bit harder. I get motivated by friends all the time. I get motivated by like weird stuff. Like I'll see like somebody on the side of the road, like selling flowers. And I'm like you came from somewhere totally different, and you're just going to risk it all on flowers on the street corner. And like, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, and so this idea that like
you could sell worse things on a street corner.
Exactly. That's exactly my thought. But it's like, maybe overcoming slightly greater things one step at a time, maybe that justifies why you're here to begin with. Like, maybe that justifies why we're all here to begin with. And maybe it doesn't matter if that story is true or not, because the lesson is so powerful for me that it's like, yes, this makes my life worth it. And it only has to be worth it to you. But odds are, if it's worth it to you, other people notice that, and it is inspiring to them.
I love that. It's like what Jordan Peterson says, like, life's suffering is inevitable, but wasting your life is not, right? Yeah. So you can waste your life and suffer, or you could just suffer, right? And I think you have to ask yourself, what would you consider wasting your life? And you got to get real with yourself. And like you said, praise yourself for looking at it, because it's hard to look at. It's painful to look at. That's why we don't want to do it, because we look and we're like, oh, I'm such a failure, right? But no, be like excited. Be like, look, I am ready to look at what in my life could be better. And so you have to ask yourself, you have to define for yourself what a successful life would look like. And then you have to define for yourself how you know, where you're at now, how you take one tiny step toward that thing. And you just see what happens, you know? Yep. Yes. Okay. So armored glass, windscreen.
Yes.
Windscreen. Okay. So like, is that supposed to go in front of the windshield, or?
I love that this is the takeaway from today. I think that we really put our finger on an important pulse here.
I think that everyone's collective ideas have come up with the perfect solution to Utah's windshield cracking crisis. So
Yes.
this has been very productive.
I'm taking this straight to Mike Lee.
Okay. Thank you guys all for watching. Thanks for our fans that were supporting us tonight. You know who you are. And thank you, Ubermormon, for chatting with me. I would love for you to
Thank
come
you.
back again soon. Go check out Ubermormon's channel. I linked it below. And everybody have a good night.
Yeah, you do the same. Thanks for having me. Goodbye, everybody.
All right. Okay, now I just have to make sure I actually stop it on both ends. See if it worked. There it goes. End stream. We did it.